I think Malcolm's going to turn up at 2:30. So a quick rejig. Beth goes up first. Beth, I think you've already shown that around in the room.
To a couple of people, yeah.
Okay, so we've had requests for this sort of thing many times, and Beth has taken it in hand and making it really top of it. So, over to Beth.
So one of the things I've been working on lately is a wallet card. So I think a lot of people with IBS carry them and it says, I have got to go. I got to go now, otherwise we'll all be very unhappy. So we thought there's been quite a lot of feedback from people saying that there's occasions where they'd like one for aspergillosis. So either, say like in a shopping centre, if somebody wants to like wear a mask, sometimes security guards are very awkward about it. And I think it would really help to have something with our logo on that you can get out and say, well, you know, I need this. If you've got a problem with that, you can call the NAC and they can tell you it as well. So I can pass a few of these around if anybody would like to. I think there's another one floating around somewhere. I don't know where it's gone.
So these are the prototypes?
Yeah, this is just prototype. So if you have a look at them and we'll get a bit of feedback on them. So does anybody have any sort of ideas off the bat about what sort of things they would like to see? Like, would people use them, do you think?
I've actually got no.
Oh, have you?
Where is that? Oh no, that's.
We used to do key rings.
Confused with the illnesses.
Yeah. So the the top and bottom bits would be like magnetic, so the whole thing would close itself up, and there would be a little. You'd have a little slip of paper that you'd write your current medications on, because you know things change so quickly. So I think the big one from our point of view was to show paramedics, because we did have a case where somebody called an ambulance because they were having hemoptysis, and the paramedics said, no, I'm sure it's fine, and he actually died. The paramedic didn't take it seriously. So it's got right next to the top in red, paramedics take me to hospital. I'm not joking. And like if you've got, does anybody keep tranexamic acid at home? Yeah, you could tick and say that, and then so like if they turn up and they know there is some if they need to look for it or whatever. And yeah.
Sorry, miss.
Oh, sorry. Oh no, I thought somebody was asking me something, so I looked round. Oh, cool. Yeah.
I think it's a really good idea, but we live in Wales with something like that. Could you put because it all relates to Manchester, doesn't it?
Yeah. Which bits would you? Because I'm just trying to. Which bits?
It's like a contact number, I suppose, isn't it? Because you would have your contact number in Wales, and we wouldn't have contact.
Yeah.
So I think we would still function as the specialist contact.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And so the doctor could phone through and get any specialist.
You get down the details from that.
Yeah. I've put in a little space to put your consultant and their secretary's phone number. So maybe it would just be a case of writing in. I'm in. Yeah. Or if anyone's got sort of any sort of specialist requirements, we could see about having something done.
That's very good.
Cool.
Actually, from that same incident or a similar incident with ambulances, we had a case where someone called the ambulance and the person answering the call was told that they were coughing up blood and they didn't prioritise. I've taken that back to the people who do the call handling, and I've told them about it and said what we suggest they should do, which they listened to. I don't know if they've ever taken any action over it, but we did pass that request on. I can maybe follow that up at some point.
And the other good thing about having on a card is I've heard people on the Facebook group saying things like they'll tell like their new GP or a nurse or something, I have aspergillosis, and they'll say, oh, asbestosis, and that's not it at all, or the names of medications, and you could, yeah, if they've got the wrong end of the stick with the medication, you could end up in a bad way quite quickly. So all the spellings, exactly what it is, and then.
Yeah, I think any contact you have with medical services, it's useful to have something, simply because it's not very well known. People misunderstand what you're saying to them, and it would be easier to physically show them probably.
Yeah. So tell me some stuff to change. What do I need to do better?
It's not going to have photo ID on it.
No.
No, we're not advanced enough to do that. I don't think.
You could get like a passport photo and tuck it in if you like, but
Yeah.
yeah. I put a bit on the back for if you want to put I put name and date of birth, because I thought if the worst happened and somebody did get picked up by paramedics that wasn't conscious, that's enough to find somebody on a hospital system.
Yeah.
So it's not kind of ID exact like proof of.
No.
It's just sort of a medical.
Yeah. No, it looks pretty comprehensive though. I can't think of anything
Cool.
immediately missing.
Could I, you know where they are suffer from this?
Yes.
I mean, I know you've got CPA and Aspergilloma and ABPA, but there are other fungal conditions as well.
Which other ones would you want to see on there?
Well, there's Aspergillus bronchitis, and I have a rare one called Scedosporium.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So could you put like another fungal?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's a good idea.
I mean, I
yeah.
have had,
Yeah.
you know, I've had both. I've got the Scedosporium won't go, but I just thought, you know, it might.
Yeah.
Because I know there's not many of us, but there are a group of people with other fungal infections.
Yeah. I mean, if there was sort of a dozen or more people with Scedosporium, I could do you one with that written on, have them printed.
You've got a gold card.
You're on my side of that.
There's not many.
Okay.
Yeah, there aren't many, but I just thought.
Yeah, we just want to make it as useful as possible, basically. Yeah, I can put another.
Just you know, cover.
Yeah, that's a good
I think it's
idea.
individual. If it's very rare, could write it on, I suppose.
Yeah.
We just said other and then you write in.
Or I could put like further details or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Or do you think that, are we being too specific?
I don't know.
Should we be saying something like you have a serious respiratory illness and the impact is you may have a sudden attack, or you may require some of the blood clotting agents that help if you've had a hemoptysis. If we may be a bit more general about respiratory fungal disease, because that's really the target of what.
It's the fungal side of it,
Is that what the card is actually about? Respiratory.
There's a separate section for I may need the following that doesn't specify.
Okay.
That doesn't say exactly which one it is.
And that's medications, because I'm thinking all the outcomes might be similar.
Yeah.
So to break it down into different types of aspergillosis might be a bit too much detail.
Yeah. Or I could just leave it open, have it that you write in yourself.
I have a serious fungal disease, or maybe something like that.
It's a difficult one. I mean, I think if you weren't conscious, you know,
Yeah.
that detail might be very useful to the paramedics.
Yes, it's true.
But I take your point. In a sense, the major message you want to get across is that it's a fungal respiratory disease. I think the fungal bit's important because that affects a lot
because you don't want the antibiotics.
the issues that you might have. But you could have a non-specific title card, I guess. But the detail might be useful to paramedics.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we've got plenty of space by the look.
Yeah, with that.
Oh yeah, loads. What I'm a little bit concerned about is if I make it too general and just say fungal respiratory, would be if somebody's trying to choose which antifungal it would need quickly, because I know, so a doctor might think, oh, I don't know which one it is, and they might start with one that isn't as relevant to Aspergillus. But I could quite easily do an Aspergillus one and a broader one.
Yeah.
That would be quite easy to do.
Yeah.
So do you envisage this, you producing them on demand, or do you envisage them being available in the clinic to pick up?
available in the clinic for anyone that wants, I would like. So, you know, print a batch of them, see how quickly they go. If they're all gone in the first week, we'll print more. And then, yeah, if anybody has any specific, like if anyone's got any really specific extra things, we could see.
Would it be worthwhile broadening it out to any other underlying conditions that someone has that they could write on?
Yeah. Because like the current medications list would have things that wouldn't be for Aspergillosis, so it could be on the other side.
So this is kind of a multi-purpose.
Yeah, it's a catch-all.
Thank you for that. So it's both a form of saying I've got this, so I can wear a mask. It's something that a medic could pick up if you've collapsed in the street. And it's also almost a reminder as well as all the different things, all the different numbers and things that you might need.
Yeah, and like it's got a thing, all the support, one section's all about the support groups and where to come for this meeting and stuff. I mean, that's not
okay, so that's
critical.
general information as well.
Yeah, that's quite general. And that I don't know if that's actually useful.
It's a reference point, isn't it? Because I have somebody this morning was on Facebook, I think, yes, it was Facebook, who's been on Facebook for years and needed a reference to where he could find a particular group, because they don't make it easy to find a different from Facebook. So having a ready referencing might help. It's almost as if you need, that's a catch-all one, and if you've got the room, that's great.
Yeah, because it's not the easiest to pronounce for somebody that's not been here before.
Yeah. It's good, Kurt. I don't know if you remember the key rings that the wife of the patient bought. I think she made about 200, and they were been available, and they've gradually gone. You've got one of the last 6. And we've, according to the lady at the WRBS, there are people constantly asking her for these now. So this actually is a far more comprehensive answer to that, and it's in the wallet or the purse.
Yeah, it'll just be credit card sized.
Do you think it'll be a paper, or is it plastic cover, or what?
Some of the middle bits are things that you'd write on, but I was thinking the cover will be plastic with magnets in to hold it all neat.
I think I'd like a space to put additional bits in, because John's got 2 other conditions that could go in that space as well. So carrying 2 or 3 of them around, have you all one of those and stuff?
Yeah, or there could be. I'll see what the options are. Like if there's like a little plastic sleeve, you could put that and then tuck up other notes or whatever, and we can see what the options are.
All the aliens together.
Yeah, just your medical note.
So do you think that's useful? That's something we should develop.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Unanimous.
Yay.
Do you need donations for funding on it, or have you got funding for it?
We're always open to donations, but actually the other thing we've done on Facebook is, one thing Facebook's done is you can now, there's a donate button on Facebook that you can share around, and you donate directly to the Fungal Infection Trust. It makes donation. I enabled it on Monday, Tuesday, and people do things like Rachel said the other day, it's my birthday, instead of buying me a present, donate. And someone did something similar to that, and we've already, in a week, we've got 200 quid, just like that.
I'm always afraid to donate online for security purposes.
On Facebook, it's secure directly into the Fungal Infection Trust bank account. On Virgin, that's a bank, and that actually helps us by adding gift aid on at the same time, and that goes directly in. And I think we've also done one on Amazon, which I'm not completely familiar with yet, but I think you'll be able to donate 0.5% of any purchase on Amazon to a chosen charity. I've registered FIT with that service, but when I tried to use it, it said that it couldn't find the charity. So on the one hand it said you were registered, and the other hand it said I couldn't find it. So maybe it's just a matter of time, and it will now appear shortly. And it's called smile.amazon.co.uk, and they're doing this for all charities. So
eBay doing something similar as well?
eBay had done it for some time, yeah. But with Amazon, I can imagine, I buy stuff on Amazon probably £20 a month, and so it would be dead easy to just donate 0.5%, and that would make a huge amount of money. So, yeah.
Okay, I think that's all I had to say. If anybody wants to.
Well, don't go away yet. You're going to do your slides.
Oh yeah, I can do them as well.
Looks like Malcolm's decided it's 2:30. So if you do your slides, and then I'll do my bit if you're still going. And then we'll go to break.
Are you logged in? Because oh, there we are.
The slides are actually on the.
Oh, brilliant.
On there. Yeah.
Cool. So, apologies for how much beyond the conference that I'm bringing you this information, because I've missed a couple of meetings and been bumped. So, but we're here now. So, when we went to this conference, Advances Against Aspergillosis, in the end of January in Lisbon, there was some. There was some of what was presented there was to do with sort of the very, very cutting edge of what new treatments are going to be coming up. Maybe not this year, but kind of not as far in the distant future. So just a couple of fun pictures.
Excellent picture of me then.
Yeah, don't worry, this isn't actually, it looks very Mission Impossible, but this actually is just a poster.
It's a poster, yeah.
Yeah, so don't worry.
Carrying something more ominous around this.
You also kind of look 8 feet tall.
Yeah. And I like the paramedics in the background that I didn't notice. Yeah. And yeah, we stayed in a hotel. It turned out to be very nice, very comfortable.
Was this the Browns one?
Yeah.
This is what I missed.
Yeah. So yeah, it was right in the very centre of Lisbon, next to it was right behind this massive outdoor lift, which is very pretty.
Where was it taking you?
It's just up because everything's on about a 45-degree slope, so it's just going up higher. So we were like on this level, and then you could go up to the top, and there was like another ground level at the top. I had to go in a weird angle to take this.
And they provided you with toys as well?
There's a doll's hospital in Lisbon. It's absolutely huge.
They're not doing a very good job though.
That was, I think this was the in tray. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
A hip replacement.
Look very well.
I have to just mention here that Beth was the only person who was brave enough to go into the doll's hospital.
Yeah.
Me and Chris thought it was too creaky and cowered at the time.
Yeah. I said if I don't come out in an hour, call the police.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was pretty unnerving.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. It was
How
a
big
bit
was
odd.
that doll?
The head was about.
It looks quite big. It's a big doll.
Yeah, and they had some really old ones, sort of Victorian toys and so. It was really interesting. So this onto the science. So I'm starting with I'm trying to kind of work backwards in order of how near to people getting their hands on them. So has anybody heard of F2G? Do you know who this is? So this is a spin-out company that actually Professor Denning is one of the people behind. So this is like our guys almost. So they've got this new compound, F901318, and it's very exciting because it's of a completely different chemical class to what we've already got. So it's not an azole, it's not an echinocandin, it's not a mycotin, it's totally different. It's an orotamide, which inhibits pyrimidine synthesis, for those that are interested. So it's looking really good. So it's in phase 1 human trials at the moment, which means they're giving it to sort of a small number of healthy volunteers to see, can you absorb, like when you take the pills, can you absorb it? How long does it stay in your body? Does it turn you blue and make you throw up or whatever? So that's really exciting. And it's very potent, and it's because it's a totally different class. A lot of the problems with things becoming resistant, they don't apply to this yet. So this is exciting stuff. So you might be wondering already, if they're already doing stuff in humans, why would you go back and then go back to mice? So this Aspergillus terreus, it's not the normal strain that you would normally get aspergillosis from. It does happen. It's quite rare. And this is it growing on an agar plate. It's really bright yellow. But it's resistant to amphotericin B. So F2G are kind of looking a little bit, 10 years ahead. What are we going to really, really need? How do we treat stuff that's amphotericin B resistant, which doesn't bear thinking about, but these guys think about it. So they're trying it against the mouse model of this really tough species, and it's in the mouse model it worked really well. So they infected them with disseminated aspergillosis, so very, very serious, like big inoculum. And after 10 days, all the control mice, 90% of them were dead already, and all the treated mice were alive. And that's a huge difference.
So is that a model of representing acute invasive? So not the chronic illness that you guys have. But you would expect from the existing medication about 60% mortality. Yeah.
So this is more the kind that, like say people in intensive care that suddenly get a very acute and really, really very, very awesome overweights. So that's fantastic. And they went a little step further because they thought, well, when in the wild, the clinical isolates that you actually get out of people, they're all so different, like genetically and the resistant, there's all sorts. So they got 93 different strains of this and tested it just in the lab. And it was active against all of them, including the ones that were already azole resistant. So that's pretty cool.
And you just run through the pharmacokinetics.
Well, that's what the phase 1 study's for. We don't know it yet.
I take it it's IV dose, is it?
This is oral, I think. Well, let me just check. Does everybody know how to look up clinical trials? Just while I'm...
Not the AA abstract.
While I'm at it. So if you go to clinicaltrials.gov.
Live research.
And then go to new search. I've forgotten what the thing's called again. And then you search for F 901318. 901318. And it tells you, you've got 13 studies and it gives you loads of information about them. So it tells you, so this one that says recruiting, that's the one that's open now. It's over in Leeds and it's comparing this new thing against midazolam for invasive aspergillosis, like the mouse model. And it gives you all this sort of information.
Why is it
oral. I don't know. Well, it's a phase 1, so it's not actually comparing anything.
Midazolam is an anaesthetic.
Well,
but it's in healthy.
It's a closest relations Valium, really.
Yeah.
Relaxant.
It's benzodiazepine. Yeah.
But it's not. It's not even in people with the disease. So I don't know why it needs a control group at all. Yeah. So it is oral dosing, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And it tells you. It tells you things like how many participants and the trial design. So this is a really, really handy website.
Yeah.
And no. And it tells you like if there's been any studies that sort of got cancelled or they've been completed, but you haven't seen the results come out or something. It lists everything. Because if you do experiments on humans, there's rules now about you do have to make all the results public, because drug companies used to be really bad about covering up the ones that they didn't like, but then the rules changed.
How much have they changed?
You have to declare
negative results.
You have to declare all the trials you're doing, because before it was people wouldn't even know that the trial had happened necessarily, which is outrageous. And I don't know the format that you have to declare the negative results. I don't know. Sometimes I have seen results come up on this website. So like completed has results. Has this one got something? Yeah, the different studies have different amounts of information put up. But yeah, you can spend some pleasant hours.
Yeah.
It's quite surprising there's so many clinical trials. They all seem to be on acute invasive.
Yeah. And that is sort of one of the limitations of a lot of what we saw presented at AAA. So, in fact, which leads me nicely on to, so another one that they presented, it's the same company but different people within the company presented another poster. So what they did was they got the compound and tested it against 3 different species of Aspergillus, and they did it in 2 different models. So this is the disseminated, the really acute, and they also tried it in a mouse model of pulmonary, so sort of subacute. Like, things are never really chronic in mice because they don't live very long. People are impatient to get the results. So, but then there's always this discussion about how good is the model? Like, does it really behave like a human being? So it's, yeah, you kind of take that with a little pinch of salt that it needs. So yeah, at 10 days, in either model, the control group, every single one of them was dead. Sorry, I'm a bit gruesome, sorry. In the disseminated... I love mice.
There are no suppressed mice.
Yeah, these ones are neutropenic, so yeah, they're not. I was a mouse foster for the RSPCA last year.
Sounds risky.
Would you like to come round to Bangor?
Or our greenhouse. We supply you.
Going to my greenhouse after me. Well, compost heap.
I don't think we take violin. Oh yeah, so anyway, at 10 days, the treated ones in all 3 species, 80% or more survived, and that's a huge difference. That's fantastic. Slightly more variable for the pulmonary model, but still 88% for fumigators.
So the
That's
difference
not bad.
there is that in one model they presumably did a subcutaneous injection or some abdominal.
I don't know, yeah.
And the one at the bottom, pulmonary, presumably it was an inhaled quantity of spores.
Yes, yeah.
So
Yes,
that, the bottom one directly relates to CPI.
yeah. Except it's more of a kind of a sudden huge dose.
So we can't translate that, if you like, and say that people with CPA would have an 88% chance
Oh no.
of a cure,
No.
because it's a different context. But nonetheless, it's an incredibly active substance at getting into lung tissue, so it may well be a step up in functionality.
Yeah, and you can also kind of look at like people try and make the mouse models as standardised as possible. So if you say this strain of mice and this model, you might be able to go back and see, well, in that same thing, what did amphotericin B look like? Was it 88%? Was it 20%? Where does it fall? And it's all imperfect, but it's all getting us step closer. And in fact, this is the kind of stuff that makes the human trials be approved.
I wonder if was there a comparison with another established antifungal to show that is more effective in this context than, say, amphotericin?
I don't think they did that for this one because that would need a whole different set of statistical tests done to make it like a non-inferiority or something. And I think this is already quite a lot of mice,
we assume
a lot of
that's
groups.
Good because it's like, look, it's good. So yeah.
Yeah, it's better than nothing.
If you ever hear, remember Mike Bromley came and gave us a talk years ago. This is the company he works for, so this is his stuff. I must get him to come and do it again.
Yeah, because this one seems to be the one that is moving. So there was a lot of other things. This is I told you it was a cute picture. Rachel's been waiting like 5 months. Yeah, so this one was, it's itraconazole, and it was an inhaled formulation from Pulmatrix, and it was a guinea pig model this time. And they were also immunosuppressed and inhaled pulmonary version. And instead of percent survival at 10 days, this one is average survival, see how long they live, poor little guys. So the control was 9 days, but with the inhalational treatment, they lasted another couple of days on average. But then you've got to remember that that's an average, so...
That'll be oral Spironox, I presume.
Inhaled.
Yes, it's a formulation.
Yes, sir. Okay, sorry, yeah, I was looking at there. It's a PUR 1900, we don't know what it is.
Oh, I see. Oh, yeah. This is another one of the rules that got put in. So companies, when they're doing scientific presentations of their data, they're not allowed to call things brand names because it's a bit too much like advertising. So if you go into PubMed or whatever to read the original papers, you've got to know what things are called. So actually, when people say I only know like this version of the name, so people give me the brand names and I have no idea what they are. And especially because they're different between like the UK and America as well. Yeah, so this isn't as dramatic, but I don't really feel like this was the right. This doesn't really seem like a very sensible way of calculating to me. But just so that you know that on the horizon.
I mean, for the third one there, for the compound they're testing, it's saying that most survived the study at 14 days.
Oh,
so presumably they might still be alive today.
Sorry, I've read it out completely wrong because I haven't looked at these slides since February. Yes, yeah. Sorry, I got it the wrong way around. Yeah, you're quite right.
So
Yeah.
it's that much better than oral Spironox.
Yeah, they just didn't die.
Yeah.
And quite often the reason that they stop the study at 14 days is that they have to.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know whether that's because it's really expensive to do animal trials, so people try and use as few and as short as.
Yeah, and you also need ethical clearance, so you have to
Yeah.
state
You
how
have a
long.
license to hold them for that
Yeah.
long. and
How long you can
Yeah.
keep them.
And like with clinical trials as well, often you have to say in advance exactly what you're going to be doing, for how long, what you're doing on the different days, because otherwise companies were kind of fiddling it a bit. So.
And the guinea pigs had other work on as well, so.
Well, exactly.
You know.
Oh, they might have though. Depending on where they went after. Actually, they probably weren't in much condition. I'm not going to look at this. Just 2 seconds.
Keep going.
Okay, so this is like much more blue skies. This is not anywhere near coming to the clinic. But there's something that actually I used to kind of be involved in when I was doing my PhD is looking at, so there's absolutely huge libraries of chemical compounds or bugs that produce weird things and we don't know what they are yet. And instead of kind of designing the molecule sort of from scratch and building it up, you can just get this library and just try it out in your assay and see if anything comes up, and then sort of like digitalis comes from foxgloves. You can kind of find what works and then work out what it was after the fact. So, but because we've basically found a lot of the good stuff already, you have to screen bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger libraries. And it's gotten to the point where actually a lot of drug companies for antimicrobials, they just stopped doing it because it was just too expensive. It wasn't bringing enough back. And so a lot of sort of more academic labs started doing it, which is sort of what I did my PhD on. So I'm really interested in that.
I was actually talking to Rena when she came back from Eclid, and she says it's now, whereas we went from big drug companies doing massive development and losing lots of money, we've gone to small companies doing it, and now down to university labs doing it.
Yeah.
And if they show good activity, the big drug companies jump in and buy them out.
Yeah, so the public are paying for all the things that didn't work.
Essentially.
Yeah.
And it's really expensive.
Now that's being cynical.
It's not being cynical, it's true. No, it's everybody knows it. We all know it.
And
But you are getting PhDs actually.
Yes. And then
at the government's expense.
Yeah, and then because there's fewer scientists being funded, a lot more of them are going off to work for the AstraZeneca or whatever. So again, the drug companies always come out quite well.
It's management of risk, though, isn't it? That's what it's about.
Yeah,
And
if you can get away with it.
benefit.
Yeah, and I think with antibiotics and antifungals, we're just so desperate for them that even if the business terms aren't great, we just need them. So in this particular one, they got a library. It was almost 60,000 chemicals they looked through, and that's not unusual anymore. So
it's done by robots.
Yeah. You get these it looks like, at Bletchley Park, you think there's a computer robot the size of a room, and that's what they look like now. And there's just like tiny little, almost like tiny pipettes, like 96 at once. Yes,
because it looks there from your picture as a nice big flask, but
yeah, it'll be a 96-well plate. We must be able to get a nice video to show you next time. That could be fun. Yeah, that would be nice.
It won't be the 96 plates; it'll be the bigger ones, which have got.
Yeah, depending on which assay. Yeah, if it's just like a killing assay, maybe they'd use another one. Okay, so zinc. I've forgotten what zinc has to do with it because I've not looked at the slides for a while. But basically, it is an important part of the fungi. So they grew fumigatus in broth, just normal broth, and they grew it in one without the zinc. And then they screened all of these molecules to see if any would act like differentially on the two different media. And out of all of that, they found 116 that did anything at all. 109 of them were too toxic even just to the cells in the mice, because they were zinc scavengers, so they just hoovered up all the zinc completely. And then they used those 7 compounds in immunosuppressed mouse model of the inhaled pulmonary fumigatus, and they did get a bit of an effect on. I don't have the numbers for the improved survival because the slide was already getting a bit complex. But this is mostly just to kind of show the scale of how many things you have to look at to even get something that half works. So when you read in whatever Daily Mail and it says, cure for whatever, if you go back to the original data, if it says they did it in a Petri dish or it was only in a mouse, they're making very grand claims because a lot of stuff is just way too toxic, or it's rediscovering something we've already got. Actually, so one of the things that always comes up, like in whatever you're screening for, there's a few things that always come up. They always have an effect on everything all the time, and so the companies have a list of about a dozen things to just chop out. And one of them, it's a bit like in turmeric, the stuff that's really, the antioxidant that's really, really good for you. Anything that's chemically a bit like that, whatever assay you run, it'll always come up as a positive. So it's whenever you see any of these health studies as well saying turmeric does this, X, Y, Z, it's not specific effect at all. It just sticks to everything there is.
The relevance of zinc is limiting in our lung tissue. So
that's it, yes.
So Aspergillosis fumigatus has a special ability to live on tiny amounts of zinc, and that's one of the reasons why it can infect us. So if you interfere with that, that's its Achilles heel, and we could work it out.
What foods are rich in zinc then that we should avoid?
You're looking naturally devoid of zinc.
Oh, they do?
I think it's an antiseptic environment for that. That's one of the reasons it is.
Yeah.
Also, your sinuses are very good. What happens, diverging, when the dentist does a root canal filling, if he goes up into the sinus, which is what they normally do when they exude the amalgam is full of zinc. So anything that then subsequently gets into your sinus grows. Very rare. There are some x-rays of a tooth with an exudate from an amalgam with a big growth of fungus on the zinc. And that's how, so zinc's not normally there, and that's what controls the growth of almost everything except fumigators.
And with like bacterial infections as well, iron, like your body, like especially in your blood, it keeps the iron it's got, it kind of binds it up so it's not free. And if you've got too much free iron going on, I think, is it Staph aureus is the culprit for that?
Sidrophores.
Yeah.
I worked on a plant pathogen. Sidrophores have also.
Oh, cool, yeah. They're awesome.
All I used to do. Quarter past.
I'm nearly done.
So, do you want to do the last few, and then we'll take a slightly late break?
Yeah, this is the last one I've got.
Okay.
So this isn't something that's on the way to market. Obviously, Caspofungin, it's already on the market. But this is just to kind of illustrate, even after things are on the market, that's not always the end of the story. So last year, it's the brand name by Merck is Cancerdas, but the patent for that ran out last year. So actually, since then, there's another 3 companies have stepped forward and gotten approved to make generic versions, that's usually a really good thing, because you've probably seen in the paper all these price gouging of the various drugs. The more companies we've got making each one, the less likely that is to happen. So this is a good bit of security, and especially for sort of a disease area that's maybe not the main focus of a lot of health systems. So the ones that have had the price gouging, it tends to be the ones that are kind of a little bit peripheral, and then these companies buy them up, and then they have a monopoly, and it's awful that they're doing that.
So Mylan is in China, Eland is probably India, and we've got an American group as well. So sorry, go on.
Oh, sorry.
I was going to say Neil et al. Do you remember Matt? He used to work for us. That's Neil.
Oh.
That's Neil et al. Matt Neil,
cool.
his name was.
Yeah. And this is just a little note. So I do a lot of the life stuff as well. So that's all fungal diseases. Actually, there's a lot of countries where even things that are, theoretically for sale, the money's there for them. There's some countries where things aren't approved by that government to be bought, and it means that people, so even things like amphotericin B, you'd think that would be essential, and there's big chunks of the world where the country's own government doesn't let people buy it, which is a bit of a nightmare. So that's one of the things that.
But I mean that's true of other drugs.
Yeah, definitely.
Some eye drops that we use here, they're just not registered in the US.
Oh, very common.
You can buy over the counter here, and they're just not it's not in the US pharmacopoeia.
That's so weird, because like America, they're not as fussy about selling antibiotics over the counter.
You can buy triple antibiotic cream in the dollar shop.
Yeah.
I've never seen a combined antibiotic cream.
Yeah.
We bring it back with them.
Well, there's one that we did an item about that in India. I think it's an antibiotic, an antifungal, and a steroid, and they just give it out sort of like for all different skin conditions. And actually, what's happening is one of the fungi, it's not affected by what's in the cream, but the steroid makes the fungus grow a lot more easily and makes it worse. So people are then coming back to the clinic and they've got something really awful, and then my housemate said I should use this, or just some guy in a shop sold me it. And so trying to promote maybe a bit of regulation on that one, because that's alarming. That took longer than I expected.
It's worth mentioning this. The first 2 drugs you mentioned are.
Shall I get the thing back up?
I think we are FF10.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. I think we are hoping to get involved in clinical trials here for that drug and the second one, Pulmatrix.
Yeah, we'll keep you posted.
Not quite sure what we're going to do with them, but that will be with chronic aspergillosis, so we might be one of the first to work in that area, which might be useful for some people. You will be approached if you are appropriate for that trial. I've just been talking to Azad, and he was just saying, where's David? As a couple of his projects, nobody's done anything for a couple of years and they want to close them down. It goes both ways. Anyway.
You wouldn't believe how much paperwork you have to do when you close down a clinical trial, because I used to do that at Stepping Hill.
You have so many skills and experiences.
No focus, I love to call it.
Before we go to break, just a minute's silence for all the rodents who've paid the ultimate price. I mean, the scientists generally use the minimum number that they can, and they try and reuse where they can, so that we minimise the use of animals in these types of studies. That's for people here and the people online as well. But at the moment, we are legally required to do those experiments. Okay. Right, we should have another break. I will give Malcolm a ring, see where he is, and force him to come down. Okay, this is what you've all been waiting for.
We now go for the Dyson vacuum cleaner.
Now the dust talk.
No conflict of interest. I'm not from Dyson. Though I do have a Dyson vacuum cleaner, or a small handheld one.
I think you all know Malcolm already, don't you?
Which is very useful. I met
quite a few
before. So, I'm interested in dust. I'm not suggesting your house is dusty, but I bet I could find dust in your house. And why are we interested in dust? Because we know dust is a wonderful environment for molds like Aspergillus to grow in. Not just Aspergillus, but molds, other molds that come in through the open window. And they love dust. So the question is, what is dust? Well, a lot of dust is skin cells. We all shed, whether we like it or not, skin cells. And dust can be hair fibers and fluff from your clothes, all mixed together. This becomes a wonderful home for molds to grow. And especially if the air in your house or wherever becomes a little damp, then that's an even better environment, because the dust sort of swells and provides a lot of nutrients for molds like Aspergillus. So we're interested in getting dust samples from our patients' houses so we can investigate the dust and find out what might be in it and see whether we can compare that with what we know we grow from patients' sputum samples. When you come to the clinic, you're producing a sputum sample that is analysed by really old-fashioned methods, but it also can be analysed by very modern, sophisticated methods, and that gives us an idea of the diversity, the mixture of molds in the patient samples. So this word microbiome basically means diversity, a mixture of molds that you find both in patients and in dust from their home environment, but also of course outside when it's dry we get a lot of dust created that also is full of molds. So this is a study which we have full ethical approval for now, and one of our students working both here and up in the centre of Manchester is going to analyse dust samples that we hope that you are happy to provide for us. So I'm just going to go through a few slides, a bit of sort of background, and I have what is called a patient information sheet about the study, and it describes in great detail what we're trying to do and how you can help us to get involved. So I'll hand those out at the end of my little talk. There's a letter of invitation inviting you to take part in this study, and then you may have seen one of these before. It's just getting your consent that you're happy to take a sample of dust from your vacuum cleaner, or if that is a problem, dust that might be lying in the corner of a room or behind the telly, that sort of place. So if you're interested, you're given 2 weeks to look at the letter of invitation. You can let us know in a variety of ways that you're willing to take part, and then we will send you a pack. So it's going to be basically, it's going to be an IKEA bag like this for you to collect the dust sample in, and we'll send you one of these. We'll send you a pair of gloves, and we'll send you a very simple mask for wearing when you open your vacuum cleaner and take just a pinch of dust out of the vacuum cleaner bag, and then it will be an addressed stamped envelope, and you just send it back to us. So it's as simple as that. And so we hope you and your fellow patients around the country, relying upon Graham to a large extent to spread the word far and wide. We would like to end up with probably about 100 dust samples. And where
is it exclusively the UK you want?
Not necessarily, no. If that'd be quite interesting.
And is the dust sampling going to be anonymised, or will everyone get to know?
Well,
all the bugs.
The name of the patient is kept within the team, and that's all part of the ethical approval, because we would like to obviously be able to know the name. So if it's available, the stored sputum, because when you come to clinic and give sputum, we keep a little bit back, and that's just stored. But there on, of course, it's anonymised. It's just really given a study number, and that's it.
If I was to participate, I'd quite like to know.
Yes, of course. So that's my answer. That of course it's anonymised.
And the important bit is that it's from the homes of patients.
Ideally.
Not necessarily damp homes.
Just from the homes of patients.
And does it have to be just CPA
patients? No. It's even though the study says CPA patients, it'd be quite interesting to get dust from patients beyond this CPA category. So that's an important point, because when the dust samples are taken from here, when they come back from the patients, when they're taken from here, they are then just given a study number. So any information about the name of the patient is kept in our centre, and that's it. The student working on this won't know the person's name or address. They just simply have a number and an identifier for that sample. So that's sort of the background. So you've heard, some of you, you've heard me talk about fungi. I've had a wonderful time studying fungi, 44 years now, from undergraduate days at uni. So become quite interested in fungi and work very closely with Graham here, trying to understand moulds and dampness in home environments, in work environments, what we can do to help patients. Some of our patients do live in quite dire circumstances in terms of housing quality, and we interact quite closely with other groups around the country trying to understand the factors that allow moulds to grow in the home environment in the first place. Is it the building? Is it the lifestyle of the person, and energy efficiency, and so on and so on? So our noses are wonderful air samplers. We're breathing in about 40 cubic meters of air every 24 hours. So a cubic meter of air is quite a lot. You think of a big cube, that's 1 cubic meter of air. So we breathe in mainly through our noses. Some people do breathe in through their mouths, but primarily through your nose. And as you probably know already, fungal spores, they vary tremendously in size and shape. So at the top here, we have a mould that seems to be implicated in what's called thunderstorm asthma. After very heavy rainfall, you get lots of these big spores thrown up from fields and woodlands and parks and grassy areas. And people who are already sensitized to this particular mould, called Alternaria, then will have an exacerbation of their asthma. This is more familiar to us, of course. This is Aspergillus, in particular Aspergillus fumigatus, and I know that you've been given a lot of information about this particular organism. Very common, especially outside, especially in this area because we're on the edge of fields. But interestingly enough, if you do sampling in the centre of a big city, we've been doing some work over the last year in central London. Why? Because an old building was being demolished opposite a house which had been converted into a hotel for children undergoing chemotherapy for their cancer and their parents. So there was some concern about the dust. But we never once isolated Aspergillus fumigatus from this property or from outside this property, just off the Euston Road near Euston Station. Never did we isolate Aspergillus. So it does seem to be very closely related to the outdoor environment, the woodlands, the trees, and grassy areas like fields. So as you know, these spores are very small, and we breathe them in. They sometimes stay in the nose, but quite often, depending on the person, they can be lodged much further down in the respiratory tract. Now, I'm not suggesting that any of you live in a house like this, but these, of course, are extreme examples. But we have seen, I mean, these pictures are taken from the internet, but I have seen houses just as bad as this in the northwest of England. It's very damp, of course. Social housing is not particularly great. The question is, why do you get all these moulds growing on the ceiling? If you look carefully here, this appears to be a kitchen. This could be a refrigerator. There's probably a lot of steam being generated, and this is a vapor trail. This wallpaper, or ceiling paper, becomes moist, and it's a wonderful environment for all of these moulds. So from my point of view, this is a mycologist's dream to be able to analyse all of these moulds. Now, those of you sitting in the front row, I don't know, so this is a totally different situation. We think this is penetrating damp. So this is defective pointing on the side of the house, an exterior wall. So the rain lashes against the wall. You get migration of the moisture across the wall, across the cavity, across the interior wall. So this is the mould growing here, and it says happy birthday. And I'm not sure whether this is before the party or after. It's probably before the party, but it's very neat and tidy. And here we have some lovely snow-capped mountains, and here right at the front we have this choir singing happy birthday, I imagine. But anyway, so that's a completely different situation. But the point is, moulds need moisture. So back to where I started, dust in a moist house with a lot of condensation possibly is a wonderful environment for moulds. So, of course, we show extremes. Here all the wallpaper is falling off. There's obviously a massive damp issue here. No carpet now, possibly because the floorboards are wet. It could be a cellar underneath, and Graham and I, we've seen houses like this in the past. So this is quite a bad example of a mouldy house. And, of course, perhaps more familiar for some people is the black mould growing around the grouting or the silicon sealant around the bath like that. Quite difficult to eradicate and very quickly comes back. Why? Because the moulds they grow on, or the yeasts in this particular case, they grow on the silicon, and of course it's very moist and warm and cosy.
In that context, though, you would expect to see moulds in a bathroom.
Yeah.
And we probably wouldn't expect for that level of mould to cause a health problem in terms of breathing or anything like that.
Not breathing, no. I mean, possibly if you cut yourself on the tap, yes, and the fungus got into the wound, that might be, and you were susceptible to an infection like a mould infection, that might be a serious issue. So here, it purports to be a 5-star hotel, certainly 5-star from the point of view of a nice room to investigate, but again, moulds around this, whatever this is, it could be a vent, a ventilation vent or something, but not a very pleasant place to stay in. So here we have another situation behind the wall here, probably a leaking pipe, again, moulds growing here. So these are now houses that I've investigated in the past, and here we have very carefully these sort of green areas. This again is Aspergillus, but this is an interior wall, which you'd have the plasterboard over that. So it just indicates that a damp substrate, a damp area, can become quite quickly colonized with moulds. So here we have a collection of moulds growing from a wall, and so this is now the diversity. So this is the mixture of moulds. This is where we use the microbiome of moulds from a typical property, and a bit of Aspergillus fumigatus sort of lurking here between all these other moulds. And contents also. So where you get flooding, books, libraries, especially where you have a lot of old books stored in cellars and stacks in the basement of libraries. If they become wet, then this is the issue here. And this, of course, is an extreme example of where a house got flooded up to the first floor, and then the flood waters receded, and then it takes a lot of drying out before this becomes fit for habitation. So these are extreme examples. So we're back to here. So dust, it's a perfect home for mold, whether it's different species of Aspergillus, and taking some of this dust, and that's what we'll do with the dust that you hopefully will contribute to this study. You can sprinkle it onto a culture plate like that, and then we can use other methods to try and look at the mixture of molds in the dust sample. So there are lots of questions, and these are all now on this patient information sheet, which I will hand out. So we can talk about a few of those. I think I might hopefully have explained clearly what is involved if you want to take part. It's very clearly laid out on this information sheet and in the invitation letter. As I say, simply you or somebody else taking a small pinch of dust from the vacuum cleaner. If that is a problem, just collect a little bit of dust from, as I say, a corner or behind a bookcase or somewhere. Just to take a little bit of that dust into the bag that you're provided with. Why have you been chosen? Because you're here, you're obviously interested and concerned. That's why you have been selected, if you like. Because also we do have a little bit of the sputum that you might have produced in the clinic. Not necessarily recently, but we do store samples for quite a long time. You don't have to take part, of course. The choice is entirely up to you. Why is this study taking place? We're just interested because there are now new techniques to look at this mixture of molds in a sample like dust, which we haven't had available up until recently, just to see how complicated and how complex the various communities in dust samples are, and see whether we can match that against what has been isolated or what we can find in your sputum sample. So I think I said what will happen if you say yes. As I say, you have time to think about this, and if you say yes, we will send you this little pack, sampling pack, to send the dust sample back. Of course, we respect confidentiality here very much, so everything that we do is kept very confidential, and that certainly is a big part of the ethics application, which has to be prepared before we can get permission to start a study like this. Are there any benefits? Well, yes, maybe not for you personally, but it just adds to our understanding of the molds in the world we live in our homes, and we feel that this information can be very, very useful. What if you change your mind? Of course, you are entirely entitled to change your mind after reading the information I'm going to give you. Of course, we respect that as well. Now, who has reviewed this study? Various levels of ethical approval have been given for this study from within this hospital, within Manchester and within Greater Manchester, and then beyond. A number of panels and committees have looked at this study. It's meant a lot of paperwork, but we've got there in terms of being able to now talk to you about participating in this study. So what will we do with the dust sample? I think I've shown you one or two examples, but here's another dust sample. A little bit of Aspergillus here, another. This is these darker green colonies. These slightly lighter green ones are very common mold called penicillium, and others. Some of these would be the spores from mushrooms and toadstools, which are flying around in the air all the time, and they grow as these sort of white colonies. We don't really attribute too much to those, but some of the clinics in this hospital are interested in chronic cough, for example, and there's a thinking that these mushroom and toadstool spores might might make chronic cough worse. And here's another example here, just a single species growing on a laboratory culture plate, and some of you have been up to the labs across in the ERC to see what we do. So we have done a little bit of pilot work here, so on a smaller number of dust samples. So this one here, this blue portion of this pie diagram, this is very similar. This is within the Aspergillus group, and then much smaller numbers of other molds. So not surprisingly, we find quite a lot of Aspergillus in dust. And so this is also showing some names. We've only been able to produce these names by these new sophisticated sensitive techniques. It's quite difficult to actually isolate some of these using just the simple laboratory culture plate.
information was from patients, or a few patients?
A few patients, a mixture of dust and sputum, so they haven't been separated out here.
So that seems to be showing 82% Aspergillus?
It does.
It's extraordinary.
It is.
You would normally expect
much.
penicillium to be much.
You would, but in this, so far.
That's an interesting result in itself.
Yeah. And then, again, trying to keep it reasonably simple. So what we've found is, so this is really the same information along here. This is some computer software package that we use to show similarity between the sputum samples that we've looked at and the dust samples. So now we can separate them out. So all of these dots here, so the blue ones are from the dust from people's houses, and the red ones are from sputum. So there's quite a clustering here. So this tells us that possibly what we find in the dust almost matches in exactly what we find in sputum. That's not surprising.
That's been found before, hasn't it?
That's been found before.
The personal microbiome resembles the home microbiome.
Yeah, exactly. So as I say, this is a small number of samples. That's why I'm here to try and collect some more dust samples from patients' houses.
If you find a nasty bug, will we be told that?
Yes.
It's likely to be treated.
Of course, if we find something sort of untoward in your house, in the dust sample, then of course we can let you know. Well, we have the sputum sample already, you see, from our patients. So not from all the patients.
Send you one as well?
No, you don't send sputum. You just send the dust, because we already have this from many of our patients. We have that's a regular procedure, isn't it? In clinic, is that you produce a sputum sample. So we have that already. So we're avoiding yet another sputum sample because we realise the fact it's quite difficult sometimes to get a sputum. It's purely the dust. But of course, we will share. We can obviously share what we find in your dust. That's not a problem. Because we do this routinely anyway. If one of the doctors in the chest clinics asks me to go and investigate a patient's house because they're really concerned about living in a mouldy environment, I would go to that house, do a structural survey, and often be with Graham as well, and we would collect dust, and also we would sample the air using a type of vacuum cleaner that samples the air, just to see what the background level of moulds is. And quite often we use that information to help patients move house, for example, or to terminate a tenancy agreement, that sort of thing. But in this case study, this is just dust on itself. So what happens with the result? Well, all the results are put together, and then hopefully, depending on the results, these are written up as a research paper. That's sort of standard practice. Who is organising and funding the research? Well, it's a mixture of funding organisations. It's the University of Manchester. It's this hospital trust. And if there is a problem at all, in terms of you trying to get a dust sample from your vacuum cleaner, there are contact numbers, and I'm very approachable, contact numbers on the information sheet that I'm going to give you. So we feel this could be a very valuable contribution to our understanding of where are our patients exposed to and what are they exposed to in the home environment.
Because of course you've also got the genetics of a lot of people.
Yes.
So you would have, in some cases, you have the genetics, the home, and the sputum.
Yeah.
Approaching the full picture.
Yes, to give the whole, but this is not concerned with the genetics. Yeah. We would have to get permission, I think, probably from the patients. It's another ethical approval. This is purely and simple ethical approval for collecting the dust.
Does it matter what room?
No, well, I mean, it depends how you vacuum clean I mean, in my house we have one vacuum cleaner, and of course the bag gets emptied when it starts shrieking out, "Please empty me." So it's difficult to say. I mean, it becomes quite a sophisticated study if you're trying to relate dust from a particular room, like for a bedroom, for example, where you may spend 8 hours a day. I mean, we certainly do that when we do sampling of our patients' houses, where we're asked to go and do sampling, spend a lot of time in the bedroom. But for this study, it's really just what's in the bag. And of course it gets even more complicated because you can't say categorically what moulds are in the dust are purely from inside the house, because we open windows. You get mould spores coming in all the time. So it's just to get some idea of what is in dust. It tells us something about the history.
We've had a new carpet, so
Yeah.
at the moment
Yes.
it fills after about 2 seconds with carpet
Yeah,
fibres.
that's
so
true.
I mean, I wouldn't want to just send you
No.
carpet fibres. So,
No.
because that would be no use at all, would it? So really, it would be best sort of vacuum somewhere else and getting.
Yes, if there's another area where it is more dusty than the room where you've got the new carpet. I say if it is a real problem, I mean you can open this little bag like this, and you can fold a piece of paper. Let's just imagine it's like this. Okay, it takes a bit. You can actually sweep a bit in. We don't need much dust. That's why I talk about a pinch, not a bagful.
In my case, I have a molting dog.
I was just going to ask about
Yeah.
95% of the dust in my house is
Yeah.
about cats
dog,
going in the garden and
which can give you the wrong impression.
It would give. We just have to take
So
those
there's a few
into
sort of
account.
caveats.
There are a few caveats. It's difficult to control for every household type.
But at the same time, your dog or your cat or your new carpet is part of your home environment, isn't it?
Yeah.
So,
And they're shedding skin cells, and they harbour the mould spores. That we know that very clearly. As we approach Christmas time, it's interesting because people who have natural Christmas trees, it's well known that Aspergillus grows on the needles of Christmas trees. Sometimes we advise patients not to have a natural Christmas tree in their house. And we also know people who have like 20 massive pot plants in their house. You're going to find more moulds there from the potting compost. From my perspective, when I'm asked to go to a house where a patient has a slightly different lung condition to CPA, sometimes the house is absolutely squeaky clean. There's no clutter, but we find a lot of mould, and then the interpretation is quite difficult. Where's it from? Is it from under the floor? Is it the ventilation? Some people have, they have mechanical ventilation. But other times when you walk into a house and you can't get into the house because there's so much clutter, and there's a little sort of walkway down the hallway, and the rooms are just full of stuff. I mean, hoarding basically. There's going to be a lot of dust there because it's difficult to dust all this stuff that's lying around. But you have to be quite sensitive that you can't say to a patient, your house was cluttered, you have to clean it up. So we've come up with a phrase which sounds rather pompous, but it says, a disordered array of personal effects, books and newspapers. Basically stuff. You'll be amazed. It's quite an insight into human nature, I think. So that's the study. If you or your fellow patients and colleagues and so on are interested, we can obviously supply you with the information and with the little pack to collect the dust in.
Bearing in mind what you just said about spores coming in airborne,
Yeah.
sleep with the bedroom window open or shut.
Well, I think I don't want to sort of interfere with how you sleep. I mean, I think it has to be dust as it is, and possibly I would suggest that dust in a vacuum cleaner might have been there for quite a long time, so it's difficult to say. Just live as you normally live. Yeah, it's difficult.
Representative sample.
It's very difficult to control for that.
But the vacuum cleaner is the perfect place because all the dog hair's gone in, all the other dust has gone in. It's like my Dyson vacuum cleaner. It's whizzed around many times.
Yeah.
So it's quite a good place to get representative samples.
I sort of an analogy to dust, which is nothing to do with the Aspergillosis that I've got. But if I do the vacuum, I'll get a headache.
Right.
That's not a man thing.
I've tried that as well.
It doesn't work.
And they had analogy
Yes.
tests.
Oh, okay.
For the Aspergillosis many years ago.
Yeah.
And they showed it as I'm allergic to dust. And
yes.
Since we've had the Dyson with the HEPA filter and everything, it's been a lot better.
Right.
Before, when we had the old bags, which were bags.
Well, they were paper bags, weren't they? I remember
bags,
my.
It was awful.
my parents' Hoover, it was just a bag hanging down from the handle. That was quite yeah, so obviously vacuum cleaners are much more sophisticated now.
Of course, got me out of the Hoovering as well, and the dusting. Win-win.
We shouldn't be doing it anyway, shouldn't we then? Since we've had a lot of information from the centre, we've moved away from carpets to laminate flooring, and it's surprising how much dust still comes. If you've seen a carpet, you don't see it.
So that yes, I mean I lived for 10 years in Finland until I moved back to the UK in 2009, and you don't have carpets in houses. It's all mats. It's all laminated flooring, and rugs of various sorts. But somebody mentioned house dust mite. Here, of course, that's another well-known sensitizing allergen. House dust mite in terms of droppings from house dust mites. But yeah, it's interesting. So that suggests then, doesn't it, the dust is coming from yourselves or from your clothing.
Yeah, he says to me, how does all this accumulate in the bedroom? I said, it's your body.
I'm shedding.
Nothing you can do about that.
You didn't believe me, so I'm glad you've said that today.
Yeah.
I believe you now.
But of course, the more people living in a house, the more dust you're going to get, no matter how carefully you dust and keep it clean.
Will there be a lot of difference between dust when you mentioned inner city London and people who live in the countryside? What about people who live on the coast?
Yes, to a certain extent. I mean, I think by and large, unless you have all the windows open all the time, I think it's reasonably safe to say that the dust inside is going to be from what's inside you or the things around you. But of course, it's impossible for me to say the dust coming in from outside, depending on what part of the country you live in. I mean, we get involved in people living next to big compost heaps. I mean, not just a garden one, but massive industrial scale compost heaps. There's a lot of concern there. Okay, that's not dust, that's spores coming in. I've got involved in a case where poor chappie got a very nasty infection called mucormycosis, and it's mainly found in patients who are very sick anyway. But anyway, he living in a small flat, and around him they were demolishing lots of old buildings with massive amount of dust created, and he's now suing the demolition construction company for damage because he thinks that the mold spores that are causing his chest infection are from the dust. Again, very difficult to prove because nobody did any sampling at the time. He certainly didn't, but a lot of dust came into his house. It depends on the sort of ventilation system, and in the UK we use a lot of natural ventilation just by windows. In other countries there's a lot of air taken in and it's circulated mechanically. So my house in Finland, no windows. Because that's partly because it's so cold in the winter, -20 for a couple of months. So it's all mechanical and heat recovery ventilation.
Is this better?
I personally like fresh air, yes, because that's just my personal preference.
So this study will be a qualitative study?
It'll be highly quantitative
In
terms of
number of species, but not the quantity.
Not the quantity. It's more proportions, as that pie diagram shows. A proportion of one mold and smaller proportions of another.
Yeah. So in that sense, you won't be measuring the fungal load.
No, we're not in this particular case.
Presumably, also the sputum won't be.
The sputum samples which have already been analysed, of course, there is a slight degree of quantification there because we take the sputum sample, and then that is plated out onto a culture plate, so the numbers of colonies. But we don't try and say, well, in that sputum sample you've got 10 spores, and in that one you've got 1. That must mean infection. That doesn't. No, that's getting into a very dangerous area there.
And how will that be able to affect us, this study then?
Not to you as an individual. It will just add to our knowledge and understanding of what actually is in houses.
So if the initial study is borne out, generally it's telling us that people with aspergillosis tend to be associated with homes that contain a lot of aspergillus.
Yeah, that's the link.
We would use that, we could feed that back.
So possibly we might feed back, well, okay, your house, based on this study, a dusty house really needs to be dusted and clean because it's a source, potentially a source of aspergillus.
Presumably the fungus you're detecting in the dust is in the spore state, typically.
Normally, yes.
And is therefore extremely small, could be carried in on your clothes, or a visitor coming in, or you know, as well as coming in through the window, or be generated within the house from damp. I presume the spores remain viable for a long time. And given their small size, I guess they may also penetrate carpets, mattresses to some depth. So I guess if you were doing an activity such as rearranging your furniture or whatever, and you took a dust sample thereafter, you may well have disturbed some spores which have been there for a long time. All of which suggests to me that the idea of actually not having the spores present in your house is probably not realistic.
I would say impossible.
Yeah, you can have less, but they are going to be there. Yeah. So I guess we're back to in terms of treating the condition, you're back with medicating the patient or some kind of filtering, which is inconvenient at best.
Yes, of course, it's very difficult to prevent exposure totally, but you're absolutely right, these are small spores. In fact, some people, when they're sampling a house, they will sort of beat they will use like a mini blower to raise the dust off the floor, or they will beat the furniture with a carpet beater and then sample to see what's in the fabric of the furniture. It goes on and on. What you can do, but you're right. It primarily spores, though. From an allergy point of view, we know that these little bits of the fungus, not the spores, but the other bits, they can be quite allergenic.
Okay. So things like the sprays which they sell for, I think typically for those with house dust mite allergy, so they encourage you to spray your mattress with this stuff to kill off house dust mites and therefore reduce the tendency to allergy. It's highly unlikely that would ever be an approach that could be taken with fungal spores, I would imagine.
You raise a very interesting point there, because the study which was carried out here in 2006, that was before I came here, they looked at fungal spores from pillows, both from vacuuming the pillow using a small handheld vacuum cleaner, but also taking a little bit of a swatch of the material and then analysing that, culturing that in the laboratory. And again, it was quite interesting, the diversity of fungi they got from pillows. They recorded how old the pillow was, or and this was just the pillows itself, not the pillowcase, but the pillow itself. So that was quite amazing what was found from pillows. Small study, I think only about 10 pillows altogether were.
You're likely to find more then, because your DNA analysis not.
This was before these molecular tools, as we call them.
So that's how you'll be identifying.
Yes, it's all molecular. Well, of course we do. Of course, we will culture, but we will then use molecular methods. It's called next generation sequencing, and it gives you this amazing diversity of organisms, but proportions of in relation to the overall amount.
You know, I go out walking, say, twice a week, so say 20 odd miles of walking through fields and trees and all stuff like that. And I come home and I get, don't you dare come in here and all that. Am I bringing stuff home like that?
Well, potentially, yeah.
It's the muddy shoes I have.
Oh well, that's different. Yeah, well, of course, you know, the mud from walking across a field can be full of Aspergillus and
I do the
more.
hoovering though, so.
Yeah,
Okay.
But is it still the area where we come in and better not getting the sample from there? Because obviously it won't be upstairs as much as it is.
No.
Take your clothes off and
This is what. So what we're trying to do to try and overcome all of these very, very valid points is just that dust sample from the vacuum cleaner. which may have been accumulating dust over a month. I don't.
I'm only allowed to one Hoover empty bag, one Hoover empty bag, one.
Right. Okay.
That's what we do.
Right.
Yeah. So it's literally like that with Hoover and then empty straight away.
Right. Well, that's still a valuable sample. You may just want to write that on a sheet of paper. We may actually put that on the consent form, which we can send you, or to get a bit more information about that type of practice. So I can hand these out. As I say, you have the right to say you're just not interested, or it's not practical for you to carry that out. I can leave these. There are 3 things here. There's the information sheet, there's the letter of invitation, and then there's the actual consent form, which is just a series of boxes.
Okay. So for people online or other people who will be listening to the recording, say contact me, then I can pass on the contact details to you, and you'll send out these forms and kits and things. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm.
Thank you.
We have actually run out of time.
Oh dear. Sorry.
Perfectly timed.
All right.
But Chris wanted to say something about. Are you not going to do it now?
Well, no. I think we're like say out of time. It was just to remind everybody that there's a new data protection law coming out. I was just wondering what people's view was. We may have to ask people to sign consents for use of the data, because obviously we do keep a lot of data, and with new clinical drug trials and as Malcolm's just said, sampling and things like that, we need to be more mindful of that. So just to forewarn you that that's coming.
You might be being asked for lots more consents.
More consents
and also at regular intervals, because a consent doesn't last forever. A consent lasts for about 2 years, I think.
Yeah.
So you have to re-consent.
Yeah. So we obviously do want to keep some of the data because it's valuable to us, but in doing so, I think with the new rules we will have to seek permission to keep that data. And I don't think anyone's going to give up the data they've got easily. They seem to be shocked that people kept all these Excel spreadsheets, patients' information.
20 years ago it was human tissue being kept legally. No, it's data. Okay.
Just one generic consent, because it's in NAC May now. You've done all different research.
Yeah, I don't know how we'll do that. We will look into that. But as I say, we'll wait for the new rule. It's 2 weeks, I think, isn't it? 20, yeah. And
it's causing nightmares in the website world.
Yeah.
Because you don't know where your information is now. The town has been able to.
Oh, we know where it is. Getting rid of it's another matter. Right.
Yeah, there is just one other notice to let you know. Small or big, I don't know how you look at it. I am moving on to a new job next month. So this is actually going to be my last patient meeting. But I just wanted to let you all know that how much I've enjoyed coming here and actually meeting you face to face has been definitely one of the best parts of this job. And really enjoyable, and I wish you all the best of luck for the future.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
You can always come back.
Well, yeah. I'm sure I will at some point.
Yeah. You might be hearing from you again at some point.
Yeah, so my new position is with an organisation called NICE, which is the National Institute. So I'll actually be doing their communications. So if you have any dealings with NICE, you might end up on the phone with me at some point.
Yes, I've wanted a speaker from NICE to come here and talk to us.
Yeah.
Use our new connections.
I just want them to put on drugs throughs and that.
Yeah. I've got a lot of people to speak to.
Like inside.
Yeah.
You'll be very badly missed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
I think Malcolm's going to turn up at 2:30. So a quick rejig. Beth goes up first.
It's fine, and he actually died. The paramedic didn't take it seriously. So this it's got right next to the top.
We'll have it for the Dyson vacuum cleaner.
Now the
No
dust talk.
No conflict of interest. I'm not from Dyson. Though I do have a Dyson vacuum cleaner, or a small handheld one.
I think you all know Malcolm already, don't you?
Which is very useful. I met
I'll
quite a
hand
few
you
before.
over.
So, I'm interested in dust. I'm not suggesting your house is
you.